Association of Schools and Colleges, the accreditation protocol called NEASC. I'm going to explain what it is, then I'm going to give us a chance to practice a little bit on some of the learning principles. But what you'll see is that everything that Tina was talking about and that David was talking about and Peter, all of that is in the same realm of what the ACE learning protocol is doing. So I'm going to get started.
Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2.
So we know that today's students are faced with a far different world than the one that we faced as learners. And it has come through every single session. The keynote sessions, the sessions that you've been into, individual sessions. So what's important to know about the protocol I'm going to speak about is that it is designed specifically.
No, the camera.
It's for Thank you. It's for video taping.
Oh, for taping.
Yeah.
Okay. I can talk loud enough for the front row here.
Because you want to print it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ross. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Diane Ulman.
I'm not an from
Okay. So I just started. I'm Diane Ulman, an international accreditation leader from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. That's who I'm representing in this session. I work with schools all over the globe. I particularly focus on the Middle East, India, and Africa. So most of my schools are in those three places. And I'm talking to you this morning about a protocol called ACE protocol, which is squarely focused on 21st century learning, which is why it's a good fit for this conference. So today's learners are faced with a far different world. We know that. We've heard it in all of our sessions. And I just want to get us a little bit warmed up this morning by having you look at this series of videos here. Is it possible for you to join? Because I'm going to have people talk to each other. These are 4 videos that I just took offline, and I think they represent 4 different areas in which learning or the experience of our learners is impacted by the world around them. So I would like you to just pick one of the 4 and talk to the partner at your table about in what ways.
مشغل.
I'm sorry. In what ways does this photo, let's for instance take the global economic crisis, and that if you choose that one, how does that impact the learners that are going to be going out into the world after school? How does it impact what we do with them in their education? So pick one, and I'm going to give you maybe 3 to 4 minutes to talk with your partner about what that means for the work that we do with students. It's a very open-ended question. So this one up in the right-hand corner is, it's a little bit hard to see, but it is robots, robotic technology doing manufacturing. This one is about the financial aspect, the global economic crisis. This is about the access to technology that young people have. And this one is about the impact of world religions. And what does that mean? These are really big issues that are happening in our world. They impact everything that we do. My question is, how do they impact, how should they impact what we do with learners when they're in school?
شوف ليكون المايك خلصت بطارياته.
You might want to focus on a section like a high school or middle school or primary school. How would it impact what we teach, how students learn?
أعطيك جاك. بشوف لي انك شغال معاها خليها تحكي.
في صوت حمدان سامع صوت
لا
Just pick one.
مايك مش شغال.
Just one more minute.
اوكي في صوت بس واطي.
في صوت
في صوت طلع.
Okay.
في صوت بس واطي.
I'm going to start by giving you an example from my
Okay.
own perspective, which is something that is just
Okay.
happening in the U.S. I'm going to start
Okay.
with the world religions. For the first
بس
time
فيه
in the
هش.
history of our country, we just elected a Muslim woman and a Native American woman to our
لا.
Congress. So they are now sitting in seats to help guide
لا، صار واطي كثير.
America, and it is a big change
هلا صار
for us
بز.
as a country to have more diversity in our Congress. For the first time, our
كمان.
Congress elected 60 women to sit in seats
يلا.
that were formerly occupied.
طيب
by
بس
men.
خلص منه بس.
So there are big changes
هذا فصل ثلاث
both
مرات.
in terms of gender, but also
احكي.
especially in terms of religion. And so what this says to me is that our country is going to be
تمام.
increasing, the leadership part of
تمام،
it is
تمام.
going to be increasingly diverse, and that we need to work with our students so that they understand multiple cultures, that they understand
أعطيني
world
الأشخاص.
religion, and that they have a background so that they can look at what's going on in our government and understand the plurality that exists in the government. We have not done a very good job at all with world religions in our schools. And it is time that we start because those people are sitting and leading and legislating for the whole. So this says to me that part of our curriculum has to change to get students to think in multiple perspectives, to be able to stand in somebody else's shoes and see the world through their eyes, because that is who we are. And we are only going to become increasingly diverse as time goes on. So the impact for me is on both curriculum, but it's also on teaching kids to take perspective, a different perspective from their own. Did any of you also take that one? Yeah?
And another thing we can notice, I can notice in the generation that's coming up now, is that not anymore they really care about the differences in religion, I mean, you can see a Muslim with a Christian, with a Buddhist. They're all working together, and they don't feel the difference anymore because their focus is more now on the digital aspect, the social media. So the social media is making them more like they're having the same identity, the same cultural identity. So this is something I think we should also.
Okay, so that for many of the young people, the specifics of the religion become less important. I also know that with digital media, they hear a lot of information about religion that's not true. So here is where we have to start thinking about making sure they have digital literacy, that they know how to parse out fact from fiction, false news from real news.
We discussed this topic, and we said that we should train them to assess the info that they can get on the internet. They can access it. That's what. And this is a very important topic because it's already there. They have access to internet. We should train them. The curriculum should change. The teacher should change, even with the learning methods, even with training them more, for example, to cultivate this access into creating networking with other children from other countries. They will enrich their information. Also, we can direct them for researching things so they will be self-confident more about subjects.
I think David Homer was saying it in the general session. It's that this is the world. We can't stop it. It's unstoppable. So we have to figure out how to use it to do the right work with students. And it's everywhere. They're going to go home and learn, so let's teach them in school.
On the part of the word religion, I think that as educators around the world, we should focus on similarities among the religions, not the differences. If we focus on this, I think the gap between our perspectives as Christian or Muslim or whatever would be closed or bridged.
Yeah. And the ability to take multiple perspectives, to understand from different points of view, to look for similarities, to figure out, what's real, what's not real, is critical for us. Yeah, how can we benefit from each other? And did you have something? Which picture were you looking at?
We were looking at the picture with the students or the kids that have mobiles. So it's like they have this passion to use the mobile and to go through the internet or games or the curriculum and the education system should make benefit of this passion around using these new technologies or these. The education system should build the curriculum or the activities or the tasks that are given to the kids according to this passion and their skills in using this. Sometimes we say that a student doesn't understand when I teach him, but when I give him a mobile, he can work with the mobile better than me as a teacher. Yes, that's right. So I think the education system should pay attention to this passion or to this skill in using these technologies.
Thank you. So looking at the robotics up here, those jobs that the robots are doing used to be a big field of employment. Did you look at that?
I wanted to second what the gentleman over here was saying about social media. The fact that we can create more engaging classrooms using social media because there's no more, backing from the progress, so we cannot really prevent students from using their mobiles or their smart devices inside the classroom. So we can encourage the use of these devices to create a growth mindset through their, social interaction, learning through social atmospheres, like interacting with other students from the same levels. But we have to teach them critical literacy before we do that. They have to know that whatever they hear or see on social media doesn't necessarily have to be true. So they have to distinguish between fake news and good news. Regarding the automation of jobs, it's also very important that we teach the students, or create some kind of learning environments that are based on skills rather than on information or knowledge, because at the end of the day, these devices are going to perform whatever,
You have to say what work is left if the robots are doing that.
Exactly.
It is thinking work that's left.
So what we need to teach them is probably how to deal, to prepare them for the world where they have to deal with such devices, artificial intelligence, robots, whatever is going to take over in our jobs, and to be resilient to the change or to adapt to new changes in a modern society.
I mean, all those jobs that used to be done by people are now done elsewhere.
But I think the most important thing is to believe as leaders and teachers, to believe in how to manage the education, and to believe that this is the real world that we live, and before how to deal with these students and with this, to believe that we want to change in order to manage our schools and how to deal with those students.
You know, Kamal, I think you say something really important, which is the mindset of educators that we need to change is probably the first step. And I think it's hard to not hear that, but to know what to do about it is important. And that's actually a good connection to what I'm hoping to show you this morning, which is the protocol that I'm going to share with you really does focus us on a new kind of learning. So actually, I am going to move right along to that one. So what is ACE learning? ACE is the protocol that we use in the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. So very quickly, some background. Also, it's known as NEASC. Some of you are familiar with NEASC. Some of you work in schools that are NEASC accredited. But it's the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Hey, how are you? NISA is an organization, yeah. NEASC, it's accrediting body. It's a school accreditation. It's Advanced Ed is one, NEASC. We're very different though, and you will see as we go through, there are other accrediting agencies. This one focuses on 21st century learning exclusively. So the Commission on International Accreditation, the protocol that we use when we work with schools is called ACE. My job is, as an international accreditation leader, is to go into schools and help them move their learning forward for 21st century skills. That's what we do. We don't inspect. We pay attention to the foundations. You know, is the school safe? Are the buildings solid? But what we really care about is 21st century learning. And it is the only accrediting agency that actually does the real focus on learning, which is everything we've been talking about at this conference. As I was listening to Tina yesterday, I was like, yes, I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about that. And so the resonance between all of these keynotes it's all grounded in this ACE protocol. So on your table are the 10 learning principles that are ACE. It's this one right here. So ACE stands for Architecture, Culture, and Ecology. And you can see on this sheet that there are 10 learning principles. And I'm going to just briefly go over them with you. And then I'm going to have you work with them. So these are what we expect from contemporary learners. This is also on your table. By now, if you've been into the sessions in this conference, you have heard that we're asking students to be increasingly more self-directed. We're asking them to have the courage to pursue their own ideas. We're asking them to have great communication skills, to have networks, to seek out and share with each other, not just within their classroom or within their school, but the wider world is their community. We're asking them to use an iterative process for developing and taking action, meaning that we're asking them to continue to work until they master what they're working on. The resilience, the ability to have a growth mindset where they might fail, but they know how to pick themselves up and keep trying. And we're also asking them to be reflective of their own learning and the world around them. And so these are some of the what we think contemporary learners need to do, and this is what the protocol is getting at. So so one of the first things that we do as a part of ACE is that we ask the school to define learning. What is it you mean by effective learning? And this is very fuzzy, isn't it? Is there any way to sharpen this? Because you can't really read what's on the... So I'm going to read it for you. I'll read it. I'm very sorry that it's fuzzy. So the first one up here says, learning at WAB. WAB is the Western Academy of Beijing. Learning at WAB is a transformative process which is intentional, iterative, challenging, and joyful, and serves an authentic purpose. I'm going to read that again. Western Academy of Beijing. This is their definition of learning. Learning is a transformative process which is intentional, iterative, challenging, and joyful, and serves an authentic purpose. Ah, there we go. Thank you. Well, oh, that's better. Nope. Right there? Yeah, very good. Thank you for us. That's one definition of learning. So the very first thing we ask schools to do is to define what they mean by effective learning. So this Western Academy of Beijing says this is what we mean. If students are learning, they're transforming their thinking in an intentional, iterative, and challenging and joyful way. And they're doing it for authentic purposes. This second one down here, this is the GEMS, World Academy of Chicago. It's a GEMS school. And they say that learning is a process of inquiry and discovery that is student-centered and builds essential skills that grow progressively more advanced and sophisticated as a student moves forward in the curriculum. Learning occurs as the result of students' curiosity and creativity. So these two definitions of learning are different schools. What they're saying is that if you went into our classrooms, you should see this. You should be able to say, if you were at the Western Academy of Beijing, you should see students challenged. You should see them working on iterations of their work. You should see them really enjoying their learning. What I'd like you to do is to take the second definition, and at your table, I'm going to give you a few minutes to circle, or you can't circle, but to write down what the important words are and what you think you would see if you went into a classroom where that was happening. And I'm going to start for you. Inquiry, in that first sentence. Inquiry is an important word. If I were to go into a classroom, I would expect to see students engaged in inquiry. See what else you can find in that definition of learning. Just take about 3 minutes to do that, and then I'll ask you to share. Just the second one. Write down an important word and what you would look for if you were going into a classroom where that word was happening. Okay, this is a short one. I'm going to play it more than once. A little bit of context, and it's important, I think, because when you see it, you'll probably understand why. I think this is actually not in a school. I think this is in a home. And I think the adult you see is probably the father. And, you know, I looked at, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess it is. Just, you'll see why in a minute. But it looks to me like it's in a home. Have any of you seen this one before? For the first time, just watch it, okay? And don't think about the learning principles yet, because I'll play it again. That's the part where I know it's the father. So, I'm going to play it again because now I want you to say, which of the learning principles do you see at work? It might be the ones you've been assigned, or it might be others. So first, think about the ones that you've been assigned and read them right now. And if you've read yours, you might just sort of glance at the ones that are not yours, just to sort of be reminded, because I'm going to ask you which learning principles are at play in this video. And then I'm going to ask you, what do we do in schools that can be like this? Ready? Tell me what about 4 and 5? You can use the language right from the learning principle.
Yeah, it's more the first one is that they're taking opportunities there and making use of their failure for success.
Failure.
Yeah.
How many times did she fail and did she ever give up? She just kept going. And so when you think about, I'm going to translate that, when you think about that in a school, how many times do we give students a chance to keep working at something until they get it? Sometimes when they don't get it, we say, let me show you how. So what we're looking for when we go into classrooms is opportunities for students to, it's resilience, it's also continue to try and try. And when she's doing this, I just know she's thinking, what am I going to do this time that's different from before? You know she's not just keep doing the same thing over and over, she's learning from each time she tries. So we're looking for that quality in the classrooms, that the students continue to try even when it's hard. Somebody else?
I could see the last two lines, learning space and time and learning community. Learning space and time, you can see that is in an open environment,
Yep.
in an open space. And the time is, I mean, it was not focused about the time that she wants to do things properly. She was given time for her to repeat on and on and on.
The time is critical.
Yes.
Yes. Like allowing students to go through that whole process of I'm going to stick with this, but it's going to take me time. I need more opportunities. And so often we move on. Yeah. And
Another thing is the relationship between the trainer or her father.
yeah.
He had a positive way of dealing with her and pushing her toward that she can on her own. And I can see that there's a nice relationship between the learner and her mentor.
Yeah.
In allowing her to achieve what she needs to achieve.
So critical. Translate that to the role of the teacher in the classroom. What we would call that teacher as coach. He's definitely a coach. But when a teacher is a coach in a classroom, what are they doing? They're observing.
Like he was pushing her forward to meet her targets, to meet her goals.
Yeah.
Actually,
But back up then, now you do it. Did you see, like, out of the picture, now you do it.
Like the scaffolding was as needed.
Yeah.
He felt that she needs that help at a time, so like he did it.
I wish I knew what he said to her.
I think he said to them, you can do it.
You can do it, okay. Just encouragement. Yeah. What else did you say? Anything else you saw in there for us?
I saw 1, 2, 3, and 4. She has a goal, and the goal was clear for her.
Yeah.
And I see her doing experimental. She experimented one again and again until she achieved her goal. And the coach or the mentor provide her with opportunities. He didn't fail there from the first one.
Right.
Did you fail? You can't do it. He gave her the opportunity, and at some point, I thought when he intervened, he felt like I think now. I think he felt that she was going to fail, so he interfered and tell her, "You can do it now."
Yeah.
Because of her point of view, when she fell down, she like laid
Yeah.
for a moment.
Yeah.
At that moment, I think he intervened because he think that he should, so that if he didn't intervene,
Encourage her, right?
yes.
Yeah. Just keep her going.
Yes.
And I was just so impressed. Most of the times she would try and she would try. That last time, you could just see
Yes.
she leaned forward, her hands were back, like I'm thinking about this. What am I going to do differently? That reflection was just so clear.
Yeah.
So this is a really good example of what we are looking for. This is why we spend our time in classrooms, because our goal is to help the schools get good at these things. That's our job as leaders of accreditation. So in order to help them get good at these things, we have to be in classrooms seeing what is already there so we can give them hints about what to do next. This is about a developmental perspective. It's like saying, if this is where you are as a school now, then maybe some things you might try to go forward would be these things. And so it's more of a coaching model. I basically go in as a coach for the school. And I say, here's what I see according to these learning principles, where I see you now. Have a conversation. And then together we say, what might be some things you could try? You can't work on all of these at once. Which one has real meaning to you? Where do you want to start? And if they say, I want to start with learning principle 5, learner engagement and autonomy, we say, okay, let's see what that means. And let's see what it is you might try to do in the next year of school, the next goal that you set to get better at this one thing.
So the school decides.
The school decides.
But what if that wasn't the priority at this stage?
They would pick the priority. But you mean like
if there are some of those criteria are more foundational to the advancement of the school. So
they get to
would you give them a tip or
advice? What I do is I usually say, this is where I see you right now. And then I ask them to reflect on these and say, which one makes sense for your school now? Sometimes the school has some more basic things that they need to work on first. And we say, maybe a little more work on the curriculum would be helpful before you start to do some of these more sophisticated things. But generally, they can start on this. But it has to make sense for them. They get to choose. And also, our job is, it doesn't, so this is so different from inspection, it is completely different from inspection, in that you could be at the very beginning of every one of these, and we would say, let's figure out what your next step forward is. Another school might be in the middle on most of these, and we say, what's your next step? And some schools are more advanced because they've been working longer. It doesn't matter. What we're about is growth. Just growth over time.
Is it possible that for every cycle to work in one school?
Is it possible?
Yeah, for example, if you take the elementary school working on one of these principles, and then the secondary would be working on another.
No, because what you want is a whole school to develop. So it starts, remember, with that definition of learning, and if that definition of learning, it applies to everybody. I guess I would say if, so let's say number 5 is really important to the school. If one section is further along than the other, oftentimes the primary is already used to student autonomy because they are much more active. You might have different targets within number 5, but you would still be working together on number 5. Because if you look at number 10, it's a learning community. The school is a community. And you want them working across grade levels. You want the school to have a deep understanding of
But then each maybe cycle would be moving at a different
Yeah, one might be more sophisticated than the other. And it's almost always the case. Almost always is different parts of the school are at different places. So the example I gave you of the 3rd grade, so the primary grades had much more of that kind of learning of the little boy coming with this simple machine than the high school or the middle school. Sometimes it's the middle school that's further along. So yes, they're always at different places. Even individual teachers are at different places. But what you're trying to do is get the school to understand at a deep level what these things look like across the school.
So you're saying that it's considered as an accreditation.
It is.
So what's the minimum? I mean, you might have some students very interested in doing that because they want the growth of these areas in that school. So what do you consider the minimum?
So it's a great question. There's something called the foundation standards, which are all the things that accreditation has historically been about. Is it a safe school? Is it a school, meaning are the facilities safe? You know, labs are safe. Is there a basic curriculum written? Is it ethical? You know, are people treated fairly? So is it the basics? Once they meet those foundation standards, then they can go do this.
So if you are,
and you can become accredited after the foundation standards.
I mean, if you are a CIS approved school, then it's not working case.
Yes, that's a good question. If it's a school already accredited, we accredit with CIS, IB, we do joint with IB, and other, like we do the national system in China, the national system in the Emirates. So there's a lot of ways that you can combine this. When we work with CIS, CIS takes some of these domains and we take others. But NEASC is always the focus on learning. And so the minimum is the foundation standards. And those are what I would just call the basics of any school that is a safe place for students. And is organized. You know, it has a leadership structure, it has some form of curriculum in place. Then they're ready to move on. And there is no minimum on meeting these. This is all about growing your school on these dimensions. I have another video. You ready for another one? Are you happy with the learning principles that you have? We'll stick with them. Yeah, this one. If I were to, I don't know what happened. If I were to play it, it comes up sideways. Okay, this one I'm not going to play twice because it's a bit longer, but it's middle school. And same thing, look at the learning principles, and then we're going to process after.
So I'm Jane Hasbert, I teach 6th grade PE. At the moment we're in the middle of our movement unit. The students have got themselves into their own groups. We did a little bit of a grouping kind of thing at the beginning, exercise just to get them to think about what their interests are. They're kind of grouped off the back of that, but they're social groups as well. The movement itself is a sequence of 1.5 to 2 minutes long, but they're using film as a way of reviewing what they're doing and improving their performance. They're also planning each lesson themselves, so they're looking at key criteria. And then the ultimately final performance will be assessed on key criteria as well. But we won't actually do a live assessment, we'll assess the final film. So the final version will be on film, their best version of, and it's the assessment part, it's the film, the final film. So filming is ultimately the tool they use for reviewing and improving their performance and also for producing their final product.
We were doing a unit, our unit, and it's called Move It, and it's all about like dancing, and there's one, and there's like sports, martial arts, yoga, and gymnastics and dance. So, and we have to create like a small video and like a sequence out of like we can use whichever like moves that come in our interests and stuff. Yeah. Because at the start we could choose between parkour and one corner we had gymnastics and the other corner we had sports, and then the last one was art. And then we just combined it all together to just make a film.
How do you use the films to improve the performance?
We just confirm together to make a film. And we can see what doesn't look good and then change it.
Okay, so take a moment to look at your learning principles, and I'm going to ask you what you see in this video that represents those learning principles. And at this point, if you want to branch out into the other ones, go right ahead. Okay, what did you see in this video? What?
It's clear. I think they've been training and piloting something. They use the video to assess the performance in order to make it much more better, more according to what is required from them.
So assess is learning principle 3.
And we have also the autonomy part.
Talk about what do you see as autonomous there? What aspects of it?
Because the girls, they were planning what they want to do, what things they want.
They could choose whatever movement they wanted to include. Yeah. Okay.
The learners with the 3 girls, they demonstrate their understanding of the goals and they communicated and share the communication among themselves. So
they were very clear, weren't they, when they were telling the interviewer, like, what am I doing here? I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Yep, they knew exactly what was expected, and they were in charge of their learning. Yeah.
And also there's an aspect of creativity as they choose the way that they will film or do the.
Yep. Did you notice that they were taking turns? And one starts to talk and the others want to jump in, and then they actually just jumped in and took off, like they didn't look at, it's my turn, but they just found a way to get in. To me, that's a student who has a voice. They have something they want to say. All three of them. It's not like one dominated. Yeah?
I can see also the social and the experiential dimension of learning, because they were collaborating all the time together.
Yeah.
And they were experiencing what they were doing. They also had, I could see the dimension 4, which is the learning perspective. They were not, they were not afraid to make mistakes. They were really typing their work, coming back to it, seeing how they have done, whether they have done it right or wrong, and then going back to doing it again.
Yeah.
So you can see that they were not afraid to make mistakes. They just want to move on and make it the best they can.
Students take responsibility of checking their acting and how to do the work that the teacher needs them to do. And the assessment, they try again and again by videotape the movement till they have a good.
Did you notice the teacher in one of those grades? Okay, their teacher, when they were bent over the screen looking at it, the teacher was actually one of them. I know it because I've seen this 50 times, but you might not have caught it, but the teacher was kind of asking, like pointing and saying, asking a couple questions, and it caused them to go back and to redo some piece of it that maybe wasn't clear. What else?
Expectation, when they try to talk about what they are going to do,
yeah,
and how they transform talking from one to one person to another.
Yeah, they really collaborated. They talk about collaboration and communication is really important. Some of those foundational skills, these girls have, you can tell that it's not the first time they've collaborated. Like they're used to working in a team. And that notion of teamwork is critically important.
Also learning space.
I mean, it's frustrating. I mean, some of our facilities don't allow us to have a lot of different kinds of learning spaces, but, so often students sit in their seat, they walk into class, they know which seat they sit in, and they sit there day after day, and they learn from the teacher, and they don't have the chance to move around to actually do and create. And I think, one of the things that both of these show is that using space and letting kids move and be active learners is really, really important. Anything else before I move on from this video that really struck you? I think probably the thing that strikes me most is that this is assessment as learning. It's not just, did I meet all the criteria, but I'm not happy with what I saw. I really want it to be better. I think I'm going to try again. And it's that ethic in the mind of the student that I'm not done just because I finished. I'm only done when I'm happy with my result. That's something that we really want students to feel inside.
They integrated the technology with the technology.
Yeah.
That's a kind of condition.
Yeah, and they were seeing the value of the technology being the best way to show their learning. And I don't think it was required of them in this. I think it was their choice. Is that time?
2 minutes.
That was
that was. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to wrap up here pretty shortly, and then see if you have questions. These characteristics. So backing up from the particulars, these characteristics that are on your table are the things that we are trying to build in our students over time. And these learning principles are the way that we do it. And so when we say the ACE protocol, it is A, C, and B. These are the things that we ask schools to work on, but we ask them, how do you want to work on them? We'll tell you where we think you are, but you have a voice as a school to tell us what you think is best for your school right now. And then we can help you get there through the work on these learning principles. So the school will make a choice. They'll also make learning plans according to which learning principles they want to work on. That we call them the major learning plans, and that is the work of the school over a period of time between them when we go as visitors.
Mary, is it also to give us, just an idea about, the phase of, let's assume that here at the school,
Absolutely.
we are planning on doing the A's. So what is the phase that we go into, and what is the cost for that?
So let me just start by saying that depending on what kind of school it is, if it's a brand new school, it's not accredited by anybody, they'll start with a foundation visit, which says, okay, the school basically a good school that has all the underpinnings, all the structures of a good school. Now we want to help you focus on the quality of learning in a 21st century mode. That's really important, and that's what these dispositions that we're trying to develop, this and the learning principles is where, for ACE, the 21st century learning resides. So once you have foundations in place, then you prepare for the first visit, which is the learning principles visit. Somebody like me comes in and says, we spend 3 days. I'm actually leaving this afternoon to go to a school in Nablus, who is at the learning principle stage. I'm going to spend 3 days with a partner there, and we're going to spend a lot of time in classrooms. And at the end of the 3 days, we're going to say to the school, here's where we see strengths, here's where we see some areas that you might choose to work on. Have a conversation about what makes sense to you, where do you want to start, and then we leave them for a full year to prepare for it, like to get the whole community to agree on what they want to work on. And then they come up with some learning plans, and then another team comes and visits and gives them
1 year. So at the stage before the 1 year, you're still not at ACE.
Yes, so it's changing, and yes, you will be. You'll have what's called basic accreditation, yeah.
So you start with the basic accreditation,
And then the ACE is like,
a growth cycle.
it's a growth cycle, thank you. That is a really good way to put it. So the learning principles are a growth cycle. And so that's for a school that's never been accredited. If you're accredited by CIS or another agency, but you want to focus on learning, you can bring NEASC in at the preparatory stage. So CIS has the candidacy, and then you go to a preparatory visit, that's when you join. Or vice versa, we might be at the learning principles and CIS joins us. So that's the stage where we come together with CIS at learning principles or preparatory. Assuming your foundations are already met.
Yeah, I can ask you some questions for
Yeah.
specific case, so from
Yeah.
that answer.
So what excites me about this work is that it just focuses on what really matters, which is learning. And so often accreditation, and even the former NEASC protocol, pardon?
They don't focus on that part.
They're not focused on learning. Most accrediting agencies focus on I want to say the nuts and bolts.
The documents are there.
Yeah, I mean, our reports are really small because mostly what we do is watch learning happening in classrooms. And remember, everything is based on how the school defines learning. We don't define it for them. We say, what is it that you want your school to be like? Tell us what learning, in your view, in the best case, what it should look like. We'll look at it through the lens of the learning principles and give you feedback, and then you're on a growth cycle.
How many visits do you come to school?
How many visits?
You come to school.
Me, personally? No. Okay. So, if you've never been accredited, you start with foundations. If you've been accredited before by somebody else and you have evidence that your foundations, we start with a learning principle visit, and then there's what's called an external review, and it's a 5-year cycle.
Yes.
So you start at the beginning with learning principles. A year passes, you have the external review, and then you have 4 more years to work on your goals. You make you just send in a yearly update on what's happening with the goals, and then it starts again at the 5th year.
And
So
this, I mean, this activity could be synchronized with the CIS CIS?
It is synchronized with the CIS. If CIS is there, we synchronize. And we also now are synchronizing with IB.
Most important is that classifications are not up to the school.
Yeah.
We don't have all the schools to do the same.
No.
As you said, every school will work on its own.
Every school's
This is the most
context is
important
different,
thing.
its history is different, its local requirements are different, so every single one of these visits is customized to the school and the place where it exists. Because you can't take what works in one country and just put it in another and in another. It has to be adapted. The thing that doesn't change is this.
Even from one.
This is what we believe is good learning, and so this is what we stick with.
I mean, it will be different in, I mean, in the same city, you might have two schools, but the learning is different.
It is. It is. I mean, first of all, they may have different goals that they want to work on, and they're going to progress differently. As long as they can locate themselves in here, that this is, they're working on some part of this. Yeah. And it's a developmental process. I mean, I don't think a school ever arrives like, oh, we're done. No, you're never done. You're always getting better. Yeah. So hopefully you've learned something this morning. I think that what we represent at NEASC is really what you've been hearing throughout this conference is that 21st century learning is something we can't just talk about anymore, we have to do. And we think this is a tool for getting you to 21st century skills in a fairly organized and progressive and developmental way. So thank you. Thank you.